Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey friends, before we get started, I just wanted to give you an inside scoop about what this show is about. I have Jessica Setnick, a registered dietitian and eating disorder specialist, back on this show for her second time, and she's here to discuss the 3 types of eaters. Specifically, you're going to, I hope, figure out what kind of eater you are, because by helping you identify your inner eater, you can heal your inner child and even better, parent your own child around food more effectively. We're going to dive into the challenges of raising competent eaters, especially in the face of the social norms we live with today, like the wellness industry and diet culture that just simply suggest our eating is not good enough. Jessica's going to help you learn the steps to healing your inner eater, and she gives a refreshing perspective on parenting children in today's world, despite all these pressures. Here's Jessica, and I hope you enjoy the show. Have you ever had a light bulb moment when you get really clear on what's going on? That's the moment some of my parents have when we're working together. So recently somebody said to me, actually, I know that I need to make sure I have enough fruits and vegetables in the house if my son is going to meet his goals. Or another parent said to me, I'm less anxious, I have better perspective, I know that I have to work on me if I want my child, my family, my parenting to change. So my question for you is, what if you weren't doing anything wrong? What if you were moving forward with the insights and self-knowledge you've always had? But what if there was another layer? And that's what my friend and colleague, my esteemed colleague, Jessica Setnick, and I are talking about today. So folks, welcome back to the Nourished Child podcast. I'm Jill Castle. Today, we have a true luminary in the field, someone widely regarded in the area of eating disorder treatment, Jessica Setnick. Welcome back to the show. I think this is your second or third appearance. I'm happy to have you here. It's always an honor. And
I love talking to you.
Yeah, I love talking to you too. And I really wanted to touch on this topic. You know, the two of us presented at today's Dietitian, and I think there was a theme coming up. You might have called it What's Eating You. I often talk about parents and their childhood experiences and sort of this aha moment sometimes that my clients have, maybe yours have as well, that, gosh, this is just not so much about my child and maybe not so much about food, but there's some layers happening underneath all of this that I want to uncover and work on in order to move forward with the things I want to achieve as a parent, as an individual.
It's so true. It's so true. There's layers of us that we bring to the table. There's layers that if there's another parent in the picture that they bring to the table, they don't always mesh smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the layer that the child themselves brings that maybe we weren't always expecting.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes those layers are sort of front and center, but nobody's really seeing those layers. But perhaps the therapist, right? Or
right.
the
Sometimes
dietitian.
you have to be an outside person to see it, but then it also, everything comes through the lens of our experience. And so when you haven't had someone else's experience, it really has to be a joint effort of, here's what I know. You're the expert on you. You're the expert on your child, but here's what I see that you may not be seeing. It can be very, very personal. I think a lot of people don't realize how personal it's going to get when we start talking about food and eating.
Yeah. So what has been your experience using sort of this lens of reflecting on what a parent brings to the table?
Sure. So I'm going to call it healing your inner eater because that's just sort of a shorthand for it. We are all human. Even as a dietitian, we bring ourselves into a session, right? And we call that countertransference, what our feelings are. And being a professional means not necessarily vomiting your experience onto other people, being sensitive to their experience. When we talk about healing your inner eater, it's a similar thing. It's recognizing what, as a caregiver, we're bringing to the table. It doesn't have a fancy psychological babble name like countertransference, although maybe it does, projection, I don't know. But the idea being that we want to either do things the same way that they were done for us, or we want to do things differently than they were done for us. And a lot of times we want to do things differently, but we end up doing them the same because that's what we know.
Right.
And so you might have grown up as a kid saying, I will never make my kid finish their mashed potatoes. I will never make my kid try things they don't like. And then as an adult, you get this feeling of like, well, I turned out okay because this was done to me. And so you end up replaying it, or you go the complete opposite direction. And the way the example from my life is that I was very, I think, micromanaged when it came to things like cooking or baking or setting the table. I would do it, and then I would find out from a parent that I did it wrong, even though there were no instructions given at the beginning. Like, oh, I wanted the green napkins. Well, I would have set the green napkins, but I didn't know. So unclear expectations are the bane of my existence because I want to do things right. And so when I started being involved with baking and cooking with my stepdaughter, she was 5 years old when I met her. So, within a year of that, we were baking and cooking and things like that. And at some point, I remember, backtrack. I was in my 20s. The first time I heard someone say to me about food, however you do it will be great. It was a boyfriend's mother. I asked her how she wanted me to cut the cantaloupe, and she said, however you do it will be great. That was like new information for me. And so here I am within a few years of that, different boyfriend, fiance, husband, and stepdaughter. And she said, how do I do this? And I said, however you do it will be great. I'm thinking I'm giving her the gift of freedom. And she says to me, I'm 6. I don't know how to do it. Right? So that's my perfect stellar example of how I may not have wanted to give the same negative experience to my child that I had experienced that was negative to me, but I aired 180 degrees into another mistake because I wasn't actually being in tune with her. And the appropriate thing to say, I now know, is which part can you do and which part would you like help with?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
But if we weren't raised with that idea, then we don't know it. And so we either do too much, too little, put our own judgment on someone else. And so healing our own inner eater is what helps us be present for someone else. So me being able to say, wow, that was a tough way for me to grow up, but I don't want to just knee jerk the exact opposite. Then I'm giving no guidance. I need to look at the child in front of me. And by the way, if you have more than one child, they might each need something slightly different, which makes the work of parenting such a big challenge. But that's the key, is that somehow we have to find a way for each of our kids to get nourished. And sometimes that means something slightly different, a slightly different approach to each kid.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And it is a lot, and it extends beyond eating, but we'll keep a focus to eating and food. But it extends to, academics, sports, extracurricular, all these things. Okay, so I want to explore my inner eater a little bit here. This is going to be fun. So my parents are both of German descent, and I'm just going to rattle off a few things. There's
Bring
no
it.
story.
I'm listening.
I'll rattle off a few things here. So I was the oldest of 4, and my mom cooked a meal every night. Once a week, she'd experiment with a new recipe. Dinner was always served at 6:00. We were all expected to be there. We all had assigned seats, and food was plated, put on the table, and we were all expected to clean our plates before we left the table. There wasn't really any punishment if we didn't finish, but there was great disapproval, a lot of disapproval if we didn't clean the plate.
The parent being disappointed in you is the worst punishment.
Isn't that the worst? That's the worst. And so it's so interesting because I wasn't an unhappy child. I didn't feel traumatized by that when I was younger. I do notice as an adult, my inclination is to finish everything I put on my plate. That's a very ingrained sort of default in me. But what I noticed when I had my own children, when my oldest was 9, I started to notice that I was, even though I'm pediatric dietitian, did all the Ellen Satter training, really into feeding styles and practices and all of that stuff, I noticed that I was starting to put a lot of stake in my children's eating performance. And
Ooh, that
I
is
caught
so, just
myself.
those words, eating performance. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, I love those words, not because they're positive, but because it tells you how much pressure you're under. That
Yes.
your kids don't embarrass you by their performance.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, that's a whole other layer we could explore as dietitians. But I think that because I was a dietitian and trained in all of this, at one point, I just had that moment. I had a flash moment where I was like, wait, 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 wait. I see myself going down a slippery slope here. And my husband was like right alongside with me. Let's go down this slope together. And I was the one who was like, we got to do this differently. We got to
I had
pull
a
back and
very
do this
similar
differently.
experience, and I'm right there with you. My husband put something on a plate for the kids right early when we were dating, and it didn't look good to me either. I was raised Jewish, and so although we didn't keep kosher my whole growing up time, we would never have had meat with a cream sauce on it. That would
Yeah.
not be considered kosher. And so he put like chicken with some creamy sauce on it, and it looked terrible to me. And the kids didn't want to eat it, and I didn't want to eat it. And he said something like, well, if you're not going to eat it, then go to your room. And they both started to cry. And I said, kids, you know what? Can you give me a few minutes with daddy? I'm going to make some noodles. And I told Greg, I mean, this was going to be a deal breaker in our relationship, that, I did not feel like there should be tears at the table. That was going to cause bigger problems and blah, blah, blah. And luckily he was amenable, because he had to sit overnight with the mashed potatoes until the morning when he woke up and realized he was at the table still sitting there with the mashed potatoes. And so he was willing to do it a different way. But it's interesting that I think being a dietitian, we have that sort of that other voice, the wise mind that's kind of looking at this as an outside person. And it's amazing that you were able to do it in your own family too, and realize, and what I think you're really pointing out is, I think you have to look more than one generation back. So for your kids, the way they were raised involves you, but also the way you were raised. The way you were raised also involves the way your parents were raised.
Yes.
And if you think about it, it goes back even further from an anthropology point of view. We are descended from the people who survived, right? So the people who survived either a famine, a war, a refugee situation, the Great Depression, the Holocaust, where we are descended from the people who survived. And so we inherit their survival skills, whether they're spoken or unspoken. And so there is no one alive who has not had a history of food insecurity somewhere in their past. And so the ones who want to make the change, are the ones who are not just trying to undo, let's say, or do things differently than one generation. It's many generations. And that's part of what's hard, because it can feel like betrayal. And so it's really important that we take all the shame and blame out of this and say, your caregivers, they may not have been your parents, but your caregivers were doing the best they could. Now, granted, there are situations where people are not doing the best they could. They are trying to harm. And I'm going to leave that out because that's sort of a terrible separate situation. But in the case that a parent was trying to help a caregiver, trying to raise a child, trying to nourish a child, the fact that they're nourishing a child suggests that they're trying to do a good job. Then they are accidentally bringing in things from their past. And so what we're trying to do is not blame them. We're just trying to make those things conscious so we can say, I would like to do them differently. Instead of saying my parents were bad, my caregivers were harmful, everyone screwed me up. I mean, some of those things may be true, but in order to not pass it on to the next generation, we don't have to blame the previous generation and say they were doing it wrong. They were doing what made sense in their environment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful. And I love the reminder to take out the shame and the blame, because I think it is easy to say, oh, my parents screwed all this up and now I got to go and correct it all. And some parents have caretakers or parents in their past that had significant, challenges, mental health challenges, alcoholism, drug addiction. Like there a lot of perhaps, and that led to perhaps neglectfulness with
Sure.
with feeding and
Even death
nourishing
and
a child.
loss, right? There's
Yes.
lots of situations where someone
Grief.
might not get adequate nurturing if their
Yeah.
caregivers are working all the time outside the home and there's no one there to provide for them. I mean, there's lots of things that caregivers do with the adult goal of caring for children that don't come across as nurturing to children.
Yeah.
And so that's where, for example, having
Yeah.
dinner at 6 o'clock, you had a
Mhm.
big family. For your mom's sanity, or I'm assuming it was your mom in that era who was, oh, you said she was making the food. For her sanity, she had to have some meal management, right? She was cooking everything from scratch. She was cooking new recipes. She had to try to get it all done at a certain time, and there had to be people ready to eat it
Mhm.
when that happened.
Yeah.
And so she kept things organized.
Mhm.
And if you were to carry that, and let's say one of your kids had soccer at 6 o'clock, and you're trying to put a full meal on the table at 6 o'clock, there's a clash there. And so it doesn't mean eating dinner at 6 when you were growing up was wrong. And it doesn't mean eating dinner at 6 now is wrong. It just means we are trying to adapt and be flexible to our situations. Now, granted, having dinner at 3 a.m. also is not ideal. There
Right.
may be a scheduling issue, right? But the idea being that just because it was done this way when you were growing up and you're doing it differently doesn't mean that it was done wrong to you. It just may not have been a fit, or it may have been a fit then and not a fit now. And that's another thing. We tend to not be very flexible creatures because we develop patterns, and that's how we survive. I mean, these are deep down ingrained things that relate to the survival of the human species. And so when we think of it like that, it becomes a much bigger thing than us. But the ethos, I don't know what the right word is, in our society is your eating is your personal choice and it's your personal failing.
Yeah.
Instead of, there's so many factors that involve which foods get to you in the first place, how ripe those foods are when they get there. Do you know how to prepare them? Do you have the tools you need? Do you have the time you need? Do you have the knowledge you need? Right? I mean, there's so many factors outside of ourselves that influence our eating. And yet the main message is always, if you're not eating right or your kids aren't eating right, then you are somehow screwing up. And that is such a negative message to take away.
It is. It is. So if we talk about healing your inner eater, which inner eaters need to be healed?
Okay. That's a great question. Okay. So the way I conceptualize it is that we all have 3 eaters inside of us. We may have more. There may be other archetypes, other I don't know what you want to call it, cousins, let's say. But there's 3 main ones that I feel like most people will be able to identify with. One is the inner rebel. And you can think of that as your inner child. That's the one that wants what they want when they want it. That's the one that drives by Dairy Queen and wants ice cream. That's the one that in the middle of the night wants 5 snack cakes because it sounds so good. And sometimes the inner rebel doesn't just want things because they're good. They want things because they think they shouldn't have it. And some of us are very, very susceptible to being told don't think about chocolate chip cookies. All I want now is chocolate chip cookies. So the inner rebel is the one that sort of goes there. Then there's the voice of diet culture. We could call it critical society. You could call it a critical parent if you happen to have one, but it's not a specific person. It's that message that says you need to eat less, you need to weigh less, you need to choose the right thing. There's good foods and bad foods, and you're good and bad depending on which ones you choose. There's a right choice right now and a wrong choice. And that critical voice of diet culture and the inner rebel are butting heads for a lot of us all the time. And you know that you're having a power struggle between the inner rebel and the voice of diet culture if you can only see 2 things on a menu. I'm thinking of Cheesecake Factory where there's 1,000 things on the menu. But if all you can see is I can have a dry salad or I can have a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate shake, I want one of these 2 things, and sort of a battle between the angel and the devil in theory on your shoulders. That means you are stuck in a power struggle because there's 1,000 things on that menu, but you can only see the right choice and the wrong choice. The third eater has a very quiet voice for many of us. That is the competent adult or the competent eater. And the competent eater, let's just use the Cheesecake Factory example. The competent eater says, you know what? Thank you, inner rebel, for your point of view. I get that you want a chocolate shake, fries, and a burger. And thank you, diet culture, for trying to keep me safe because that's what you're trying to do by saying eat a dry salad. But I need to think this through. And so you can already see why the competent eater gets nudged out, because the competent eater needs a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
How hungry am I?
Yeah.
When is my next eating opportunity? How
Mm-hmm.
much can I afford financially?
Mm-hmm.
How much money do I have with me? What is the context? How much time do I have to eat?
Mm-hmm.
You have to really be a calm and unflustered eater, as Ellen Satter says, to
Yeah.
put all this into thought. The competent adult sees 1,000 possibilities, which can be really overwhelming. No wonder the other two try to narrow it down. The
Mm-hmm.
competent eater says, I could have a salad and a chocolate shake.
Mm-hmm.
I could just have fries for lunch, right? I could share a burger with someone and something else, right? The competent eater sees this whole infinite world of possibilities.
Spectrum.
And what did you say?
Spectrum.
A spectrum. Yes, a
Sees a spectrum.
rainbow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the harder place to live, because it's so alluring to think there's a right choice and a wrong choice, because then I either make the right choice and feel good, or I make the wrong choice and feel bad, but at least I know I did something and I know the explanation for how I feel.
Yeah.
And the gray area is very amorphous, and we don't love to live in that gray area. How do I know I made the right choice? Well, choices for eating are like branches of a tree. If you've ever tried to climb a tree or watched a squirrel climb a tree, they climb a branch and that leads them to more branches. And then they take another branch and that leads them to more branches. And it's the same thing. If you eat, let's say, an Egg McMuffin and chocolate milk at McDonald's for breakfast, that will lead you to other choices during the day. If you believe that that was a bad choice, your whole day can be now bad choices. But if instead you think, yeah, I had a source of grains, I had a source of protein, I had a source of calcium, okay, then that leads you to other choices in your day. If you have a cup of coffee for breakfast, that leads you to different choices in your day. And none of these choices are right or wrong. They just lead you to more choices. And that is so, what is the right word? Dissonant? I don't know. For our small pea-sized brains who just say, just tell me what to eat.
Just tell me what to eat.
And so we get caught up with the inner rebel and diet culture battling, and we don't give that competent eater voice enough time, enough space. And also, by the way, you cannot be famished when you're trying to listen to the competent eater voice. So you have to be calm and unflustered in order to make those decisions. And think about how you feel afterwards and what would you like to do about it? What if you had a dry salad and you're still hungry? Okay, what next? The competent eater can make those choices. And P.S., the competent eater, I want to be very clear, does not only base things on how hungry you are. Because just as an example, if the competent eater, if you're going on a hike, let's say you're going on a 5-mile hike, the competent eater might say, I'm really not very hungry right now, but I need to eat something. I'm going on a 5-mile hike and I'm going to pack some Kind bars in my backpack for when I need them, right? So the competent eater uses this whole buffet, pun intended, of input to make decisions. And it's much harder to do, but that's the goal, is to heal the inner rebel and say, I get that you want what you want when you want it. And diet culture, I get that you're trying to keep me safe by keeping me sort of socialized, but I'm going to hear those things and I'm going to look within, find my own North Star and figure out not what is the best choice for me right now, but the choice that I choose. And from that, I will make other choices. That takes the pressure off of whatever is the best choice right now is not necessary. We don't have to find it because there'll be other eating opportunities that come along.
Right. Hey guys, I just want to take a quick break and encourage you to subscribe to this show. And if you can, share it with just one friend. Whether you do that on YouTube or you do it on your podcast app, I would greatly appreciate it. And I also want to invite you to join my newsletter called The Munch, MUNCH. You can simply go to thenourissedchild.com/munch and sign up. Also, don't forget, thenourissedchild.com has tons of information for you about nutrition for kids and feeding them, and I hope you will find it a useful resource. Okay, let's get back to the show. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of spectrum thinking, a lot of so I'm unpacking some of this and wondering what, some of the listeners are thinking in terms of what leads you to be a rebel, versus a diet culture focused eater versus a competent eater? What is the prequel to that?
Yes.
Because
So
it's
remember,
got to be something in childhood, which is going
yes.
to,
But remember, we have them all. We have them all
we
in
have
us,
them all. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
We're all swimming in the diet culture soup. And you don't have to call it the diet culture soup. You can call it the protective instinct. You
Mhm.
can call it any number of things, because
Mhm.
what it is doing ultimately is trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you socially acceptable,
Can you call
right?
it the social norm?
You could call,
The
interesting.
social norm?
Even though the social norm is going to be different for different people, different cultures, different, right? But
Yeah.
yes, you could call it the social norm. That's a great way to describe it. And our social norm happens to be diet culture right
Yes.
now.
Mhm.
So in a different setting, the social norm could be, for example, in some countries, if you don't have a fat, chubby baby, you are doing something wrong.
Mhm.
Right. And that's the social norm. So
Yeah.
I love that word, the social norm. I'm going to use that from now on because it just really speaks to me. So thank you.
Okay,
The
good.
social norm is what's trying to keep you safe, right?
Yeah.
People pleasing is a survival skill. Staying with the tribe, staying with the group is a survival skill. We cannot survive on our own.
Yeah.
Granted, it's 2025. You could probably survive on your own. But over the course of human history, you cannot survive on your own. And so we have to be able to get along with
Yeah.
other people. We have to go along. So the social norm is trying to keep us safe,
Mhm.
right? But that doesn't mean it's keeping us nourished. It
Right.
might keep us very, very hungry.
Mhm.
And then the inner rebel is what comes out. And that's why people are ping-ponging back and forth, because the inner rebel is really about individuality. And of course, that clashes with the social norm. Individuality is, I get that you're eating whatever you're eating, or you weigh whatever you weigh, but that may not be the right choice for me. I get that you wanted the green napkins, but I wanted pink polka dot napkins. And so the inner rebel is the one that I think, if we are healthy and integrated, it means we hear all of our voices. But if one of them has been, I want to say dysregulated, but that's not quite the right word, criticized, if one of them has been disowned, told it's not good enough, that's when it starts to get louder and louder, right? So that's why you see someone who might be eating, finger quotes, perfectly all day on a diet and then binge eating at night because they finally let their guard down, or someone who is eating very precisely in front of other people and eats differently when they're alone. And so that's the back and forth of those two. And so that's how we get dysregulated, is not because we have those parts. Everyone has them. It's because the competent adult is not strong enough or being listened to enough to navigate between them. And to say, for example, the social norm is that we all eat turkey on Thanksgiving, but my kids don't like turkey, so I brought macaroni and cheese and I fix it on the stove at Thanksgiving, and I'm not embarrassed because everybody likes macaroni and cheese. So we all eat macaroni and cheese, and I know that my kids have something to eat when they don't like turkey.
Yeah.
But it's hard to buck social norms when people are using them as survival skills.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so interesting because I also wonder how much temperament plays into sort of the three different eating styles. You know, when you think about temperament, you have sort of the shy, timid temperament, you have the sort of oppositional, more aggressive temperament.
Yeah.
Similar, I forget what the middle one is, but I wonder, when we're talking about kids, because they all presumably have these inner eaters as well,
Yep.
right? And I wonder
Absolutely,
if
yes.
early on, if temperament plays a lot more into that, and at what point does it flip and switch over?
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think kids have the competent eater. And I
Yes.
think we socialize them to have the inner rebel and the social norm.
Yes.
And I think what we're trying to do as adults is get back to our competent eater. We're not trying to convert into a new competent eater. We're trying to roll back the messages that we got about this food is bad, this food is good, this food makes you gain weight, this food makes you lose weight, right? There's people who will never eat cabbage again because of the cabbage soup diet, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the listener's age, they may remember the grapefruit diet, right? There's all kinds of things where it's like, this food has negative calories, la la. No kid is born with that.
No.
You're socialized into that stuff. And so that's where I feel like everyone has all of them. I think it's how we respond to the social norming that might make the inner rebel louder, louder, louder.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I cringe when I hear parents say, "How many carbs does my—" No, and even worse, when the child says,
Oh,
"How many carbs
yeah.
should I be eating?"
Right.
So that's an example of the social norm of the diet culture,
Yes.
eater influencing
Way
children
too much. Yes.
way too
Because
much.
that competent eater in that child at a very young age knew how much formula or how much breast milk that they needed, how much strained peas they needed,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there's that Ellen Satter talks about that moment when the child spits out the spoon. It's kind of like, I think of it as having a sound like "Puh," like they're done.
Yes,
The last peas come right out their mouth. You can put them in, but
they're coming out.
they're coming out.
Yeah.
And that's sort of that satisfied, I've had the right amount. And at
Mhm.
some point, and you may know this study, I love this study, dietitians did it. Between 3 and 5 is when we social norm those kind of I'm finished cues out of kids. The
Yeah.
dietitians gave 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds different size plates of macaroni and cheese,
Mhm.
famous kid food, macaroni and cheese,
Yep.
smaller plates with a smaller amount, medium sized plates with a medium amount, bigger plates with a bigger amount on different days. And what
Mhm.
they found was the 3-year-olds, no matter what size plate you gave them, they ate the same amount. They wandered off to go play.
Mhm.
The 5-year-olds ate a different amount depending on how much you gave them.
Yeah.
And so they were learning already to look at external cues for how much to eat. Somewhere
Mhm.
between 3 and 5 is when we stop letting kids, and unfortunately it happens even younger for some kids, but I think by 5 years old, most kids are getting socially normed to eating at certain times, eating certain foods, not eating
Mhm.
certain foods. I mean, hopefully they're getting social normed into washing their hands before eating and some of those things, but there's also, so there's good social norms that are healthy, et cetera.
Sure.
But I think with food, we put all these social norms on food thinking we're helping kids, and
Mhm.
really we're not. We're taking them away
Mhm.
from that competent eater inside, which then they may have to go back later and
Yeah.
try to uncover.
Yeah. So, if we're talking about, let's say we're talking parents and caretakers, and we're talking about healing their inner eater, what's step one?
Step one is be aware.
Okay.
Just notice. Start noticing the things that you hear in your head. I think shame is a big one. If
Mhm.
you, I mean, when you are with your kids in a public place eating, what are the thoughts that go through your mind? They're so messy. They're so loud. Wow, I paid for all that food and they didn't eat it. I bet you some of those things that you hear are things that you heard growing up,
Mm. Mhm.
or they're 180 degrees, which is another form of not attuned, right? Just doing things
Yes.
the exact opposite as they were
Mhm.
done to you is also not attuned to the individual child.
Mhm.
And so I would say first, just be aware that there is stuff, noise besides facts. There is a lot of opinion, emotion, that kind of thing, and maybe even start jotting them down. If you
Mhm.
can start dividing it up into this is what my inner rebel says, this is what my social norm says, you're on a great path to be able to then navigate between them with the competent adult. And I think writing stuff down gets it out of your head and makes it a lot easier. And
Yeah.
so what I ask my patients to do is I draw like a quarter size on 2 circles on the paper, and I call one the inner rebel and one I'm going to now call the social norm. And I ask them, what are these two voices saying? So
Yeah.
let's say the inner rebel is saying, like, I always wished my parents would just give me a hot fudge sundae for dinner. So I'm going to give my kid a hot fudge sundae for dinner. And the social norm says, oh my gosh, you're a terrible parent. Then try to come up with what a competent adult would say. And you may have
Mhm.
to picture someone. For my husband, I'm thinking of Aunt Jean Ann, like the most loving, wonderful, kind person that you would ever imagine, that thinks you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. What would Aunt Jean Ann say?
Mhm.
And I bet Aunt Jean Ann would say something like, oh, hot fudge sundaes are delicious, but I'm not sure a hot fudge sundae is going to give you the energy that you need to do your homework tonight. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if maybe we could pair that hot fudge sundae with a turkey sandwich, or, right, something
Yeah.
very kind and nurturing that provides maybe better nutrition, but doesn't make you feel like a bad person for wanting an ice cream sundae for dinner, right?
Yeah.
So see if you can channel that kind, loving, nurturing person which is
Mhm.
inside you, but you
Mhm.
may need to use someone else's avatar or image in order to call upon that. And that's the first step, is just noticing those voices, trying to sort of identify them as not you, as your rejection of yourself, and then trying slowly but surely to think about how you want to do things differently.
Yeah.
And then when things keep coming up, that's when you take that to a counselor, you take that to a dietitian, when you say things like, but if I want my family to eat meat and my parents raised me vegan, then am I betraying them? All that stuff then needs to get untangled in a different forum. Sometimes you really need to look at that in the context of family experiences, et cetera, not just from the internal point of view, but the bigger family system.
Yeah. I would say with some of my clients, they're out of touch with their competent eater, and they're really lost with how to parent their children when they're out of touch with themselves around eating.
Well, I think that is really normal, right? But I also think that you don't have to be a perfect competent eater in order to help raise competent eaters, because part of being a competent eater is not having all the answers.
Yeah.
And that is something we are not trained or taught or even allowed to say, right? I mean, when you were a kid, didn't you think that your parents had all the answers? And when you grew up, you would too? Of course. That's that's a survival skill. We have to believe our dad is the strongest and our mom is the prettiest. That's how we get, we feel safe. And so when we realize, oh my gosh, I don't have all the answers, they didn't have all the answers, it's a much more amorphous, scary world to live in, but it's the true world. And so if you say to your kids something like, I'm not sure what is the right choice here, I'm not even sure there is a right choice, let's talk it through. What would it be like if we ate dinner after soccer practice? What would it be like if we ate dinner before soccer practice? How should we make this decision? I think that's okay, because your kids might say, if I eat before soccer practice, I'm worried I'll have a stomach ache during soccer practice. Or if I wait to eat till after soccer practice, I'll be so hungry. And you might come up with a solution together. What if you have half a sandwich before soccer practice and half a sandwich after soccer practice?
Yep.
Right? Or what if you have a smoothie before soccer practice and then we have dinner after soccer practice, right? That's the competent adult, is not saying, I am the boss, I know the answer for you. It's, let me teach you how we use our brains to make decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
It's like you're teaching your kid to fish instead of giving them a fish, to mix metaphors.
Yeah, no, this is very good. What about sort of, you're in the eating disorder world, and I'm sure part of your work is helping your clients heal their traumas from childhood, their inner eater. What sort of advice, and would your advice change? I don't know if it would, in that context, in the context of a parent or caretaker with a history that might still overshadow some of their parenting? Or
my advice is the same, with the addition that you have to layer on that there is another voice. I said there might be more, right? But there may be an eating disorder voice. Now, the eating disorder voice may be the inner rebel, it may be the social norm, but it may also be something else. And it may flip back and forth. It's sort of like, those spelunker helmets that have a light, right? When you go into a cave, it's sort of like the light may be floppy and it may flop back and forth. And so there is no sort of cohesive guide, except maybe a negative one. And so even more so, the competent adult has to really get reminded to pay attention to, what does the competent adult say? And it may be something that someone cannot do for themselves in that moment. The competent adult may be really buried under depression, under anxiety, under substance abuse. There may be reasons why someone is not sort of free to follow their competent adult. What in DBT is called the wise mind, right? That is just, it's there somewhere, but it's being sort of, the radio signal is being jammed. And so it's really important in those situations that we make sure someone has a level of support, that they don't have to be their only source of nutrition. So for example, that might mean someone else taking care of grocery shopping. It might mean someone else taking care of preparing meals. It might mean someone else making sure that there is a set meal time and that everyone comes to the table, or whatever the case may be that will help support that person. It might even be an online meal support group where there's just other people that hold someone accountable to actually have a meal at a certain time. And so the advice is not different. It's just that the level of support in order to make change might be much, much higher.
Yeah. Good insight. Is there a competent eater in every individual?
I would say there's exceptions to everything, right? And so there are individuals who are born with genetic mutations where they cannot ever feel satisfied, let's say, from eating. And so that person, in theory, you could say they have a competent eater, but again, it's malfunctioning, let's say. So I don't think we can say everyone has a competent eater inside. And some people, unfortunately, have had such terrible experiences with eating that I'm just thinking, and I don't even know if this is true, but I heard once that Angela Merkel, the ex-chancellor of Germany, had to have her cupboard stocked with bread because she grew up during the East German communist era and would wait in bread lines all day with her parents, and then sometimes would get to the end of the line and there'd be no bread at all. And so she doesn't feel safe going to sleep unless there's bread in her house, right? So it's that kind of stuff that I feel like it may never heal, but we can hopefully learn to manage it. Or my Uncle Stanley was, I'm going to say the wrong thing, but I think maybe North Africa during World War II, and there was a drought, and he would always go to sleep with a glass of water by his bed, right? Some of these things that happen to us are not erasable. We're not trying to become a baby who is completely ignorant of our life experiences. But can we acknowledge our life experiences and then consciously choose how to move forward? So Angela Merkel having a loaf of bread, my Uncle Stanley having a glass of water by the bed, this is not hurting anyone. It's not hurting them. It's not impairing their nutrition. It's when something is sort of accepted, acknowledged, and you're not feeling ashamed. You don't have to hide it. It just is. That's okay. You've now integrated it into your competent eater who says, yeah, I probably could force myself to go to sleep without a glass of water, but I don't have to and I don't want to. I'm going to put my energy into something else.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So the answer to your question is a complicated one because it's not that we're all trying to erase our experiences. We're trying to acknowledge them and then choose how to move forward.
Do you have resources for parents who might want to, really travel down this path? I mean, for a lot of parents listening, this might be the very first time they're hearing anything like this.
So I do have a workbook called Healing Your Inner Eater.
Okay.
And the website is healingyourinnereater.com. And I can put a code podcast. And so that'll bring the price down on the workbook for your listeners. I also am thinking about doing a live workshop and maybe an online workshop. And so if you go to that website, healingyourinnereater.com, there'll be a place to sign up to find out when the workshop is happening if I move forward with it.
Okay, that sounds great. Anything else you want to share around healing your inner eater with parents and even professionals out there that are listening?
It's such an imperfect process.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time and it's really a lifelong project, right? So there can be something that you think, oh yeah, I've conquered that. And then in a time of stress, it may come right back out again. And it doesn't mean you're back at square one. It means if you're doing something with your food that you thought you don't do anymore, look to what the stressor might be, because the younger you were when something happened, the more alluring it is to say, that was so long ago, that's not still affecting me. But the truth is, the younger you were when it happened, the more of your life has developed around it. And so you're not going to change in an instant. And so, for example, when I'm talking to parents and a kid with an eating disorder, and let's say the group has agreed to not talk about food and calories at a mealtime. I'll say to the parent, that's great that you did that. And I'll say to the patient, listen, your parents aren't going to be perfect. Rome wasn't built in a day. I probably won't say that to a teen, but I would just say, listen, they're not going to be perfect. And so when your parent says to you, are you sure you should be eating that? Or have you eaten enough? I want you to say, thanks, Mom. I know you love me. I love you too. Because we need to be prepared for these behaviors not to change overnight. We need to be prepared to have a long-term relationship, even though it's going to take time to change the behaviors.
I find some of this to be very close to the experiences I have with parents around feeding styles and practices.
Well, I'm not surprised at all. We do the same work.
Yeah. Similar work, maybe some different language, but it's the same. It's like under stress, you're going to go back to the old routines, and that awareness of what your routines or your gut reactions are is the path forward. Just that awareness. Because once you see it, I always say, once you see it, you can't not see it.
Yeah.
Right? Once you see it, you can't not see it. Jessica, I love having you on the show, as always. Thank you so much for your insight and your stories and your relatability. It really makes a terrific episode.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I just thought of this, and it just goes in the same bucket of be kind to yourself, parents. Remember, you can always repair. You don't have to be perfect. You can always repair. If you get in some kind of power struggle with a kid over eating that last bite or eating one bite of peas or something like that, and there's tears or you're getting near to that point, you can say, you know what? I just realized this isn't the kind of relationship I want to have with you. Let's just step back. Or you can say it later. You can say, I think things got heated at the dinner table, and I just wanted to say, I'm sorry and I love you, and can we hug it out? And I'm going to try to do it differently next time. And so knowing that we can repair means we don't have to be perfect.
That's right. Good piece of advice and a good addition. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.